Good morning, everybody, to City High School. And we have a very, very, very special opportunity today, a very rare opportunity. It's not every day that you get to speak or to have in our presence via Skype the former Comptroller of the United States. Setting this up is the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. And the way I'd like to kind of introduce this is here at City High School, the seniors have had both civics and economics, and the juniors have had economics. And I think most of them realize that our debt crisis that we're in is a large problem here in the United States today, as well as the influence that it causes globally. What most people don't know, however, is the overall problem that it causes and what it's going to mean to them as they kind of continue on with their life and as they move forward in life. And even more so, I don't think most of them realize or have, because of the massive amount of debt that we have, what steps can be taken to kind of help solve this crisis. And if there's anything, being that it's so overwhelming, what can be done about it? So today we've got the special opportunity to talk to some of the experts in the field and get their opinions and their advice on things that you as 16, 17, 18-year-old young adults heading into full adulthood and college of the steps that you can take. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Rick Baker, who is president of the Chamber of Commerce, and let him do his thing.
Good morning. Well, thanks for letting us join you this morning. Hopefully you'll enjoy this opportunity. It's not every class in America that has David Walker Skyping in this morning, and so I think it's a great opportunity for this group of folks. One of the reasons the Grand Rapids Chamber was interested specifically in bringing this event to City High this morning was because I'm looking at the future CEOs of Grand Rapids businesses, I hope, because we want you all to come back to Grand Rapids and run the businesses in our community. And one of the reasons we wanted to expose you to the national debt and the message that David Walker has is because there seems to be a kind of an apathetic attitude in our population about the national debt. I think the numbers are just too large for them to get their heads around. They can't relate to the numbers, and so they just kind of think, well, somebody else will deal with it. That somebody else are the folks that I'm looking at. If we don't do something now, this is going to be an even bigger issue for the folks that I'm looking at. And so we wanted to expose all of you to this so you can go and talk to your friends and they can all start talking to their parents and all of us become a little bit more interested in what's going on in our nation. The Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce is the business community of Grand Rapids. We represent all of the businesses in our community. We have 2,700 businesses that invest in our organization so that we can do our work. We advocate on behalf of the business community on issues that affect them, their ability to stay in our community and to grow in our community, whether it be a public policy position, the availability of talented workers, or transportation issues. We also have programs that help develop the future leaders of our community because we understand how important it is that we have good leadership at the elected level, whether it be the school board, the city council, state, federal level. And we also want them engaged in nonprofit organizations, creating a good place for us as a community, a great place to live. Because being a good community to live in is key to us to attract folks like you back to our community, and thus the businesses that we need to have in our community. I want to invite Donna Jo from the City Department of Finance. I guess you're the comptroller. She's much smarter about finance than I am. And have her make some opening comments, but then we really want to get right into David Walker's comments, and then we'll follow up with some questions afterwards. Donna Jo?
All right.
Thank you, Rick. So I am the city controller, comptroller. It's spelled the same way as David Walker's title, except I do the city stuff, and it's a much smaller budget. We have a $300 million budget, what we spend, and the federal government, we know, has over a almost $15.6 trillion debt. How many of you took that fiscal IQ test? All right, and how did you do? Not so well. Very well. So some very. It gave you the average of the people who took the test, right? And how did you compare to that average? Were you above the average? Right about the average? A little above, about the average. All right, that's pretty good. Like Mr. Baker says, you guys are the future, right? You're the future leaders of Grand Rapids business, community. So it's very important that we understand these issues. And David Walker is here to kind of make us aware of what's going on and perhaps what we can do to better, right? To give us a leadership guide for our future. So I'm going to turn it back over to Rick real quick, and then he can introduce Mr. Walker, and we'll get the show on the road.
Thanks, Don and Joe. And we will be back, especially her, to answer questions after Mr. Walker's comments. But first of all, we would like to thank Mr. Walker for joining us this morning and welcome you to Grand Rapids, to City High School, the premier high school within our community, training the the creme de la creme of the Grand Rapids young people. And so welcome to Grand Rapids, Mr. Walker.
All right, Mr. Walker, can you hear us?
I can, but when we get to the Q&A, please make sure that people use the microphone closely because I'm having difficulty hearing unless the microphone is being used, people are close to the microphone.
All right, I'll be able to narrate, but what we're looking forward to hearing now is a little preview of the speech that you're going to give in Grand Rapids and why you've been touring the country talking about the issues that are near and dear to your heart as well as your organization's heart.
Sure. First, I'm glad to be before you today, and I'm looking forward to coming to Grand Rapids next week. And before I give you some brief overview remarks, let me give you a little bit more about my background so you can understand where I'm coming from. I'm a certified public accountant, which means I'm good with numbers, among other things. But I have 20 years of experience in the private sector, including running a worldwide line of business for a major accounting and consulting firm. I have 15 years of experience in the federal government, including running 3 federal agencies and serving as trustee of Social Security and Medicare and as Comptroller General of the United States, which is like the Auditor General. I have 4 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector and have served as CEO of 2 nonprofits, including the current one, Come Back America Initiative. So I have a very diverse background with regard to the sectors of the economy. I've been fortunate that I've traveled to about 100 countries, and I've got a lot of international experience as well. So with that as background, and it's important for you to understand, I'm a political independent. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. At the same point in time, I was appointed to high-level positions in government by both Republicans and independents, Reagan, Bush 41, and Clinton. But in the final analysis, I want to do what's right for the country. I like for every president to be successful because it's in all of our interest. On the other hand, some are more successful than others, and we're facing serious problems. Let me lay it out for you. I don't know how many of you have had financial literacy type of classes or basic financial classes in high school. Have you had that? Can raise your hand if you've had that.
They are moving their way into AP Economics coming out of civics.
Okay, great. Well, let me give you a sense on what's going on at the federal government. The federal government used to be 2% of the U.S. economy in 1800. Now it's 24%, almost a quarter. And based on current policies, it's going to be 37% of the entire economy of the United States in 2040 if we don't change course. Now, you might say that's not a problem, but in reality, if government gets that big, it means there's less opportunity with regard to private sector, et cetera. And while the government has important roles to play, it's not the engine of growth, innovation, and job creation. And so that's a problem. But more fundamentally, the federal government is spending $1.40 for every dollar that it takes in. So in other words, for every dollar it takes in, it's spending $1.40, and it is charging the rest to in effect, credit card by borrowing money. And right now, there's no credit card limit. Now, who's going to pay that credit card bill? You and your children. That's who's going to pay the bill. What's going on right now is the country is spending much more money than it has. It's charging the credit card, and it's expecting young people to pay the bill. That's not only irresponsible, it's unethical, and it's immoral, and it needs to stop. Now, there's a challenge, because right now we have a weak economic recovery, we have high unemployment, and even higher underemployment. By that I mean people who are working part-time that want to work full-time, or people that have taken jobs that frankly they're a lot more skilled for, but they can't get the kind of job they want. We need to deal with that, and we need to make sure that we try to increase economic growth. And so that means that you don't end up significantly cutting government spending right now, and you don't end up significantly increasing taxes right now, because if you do that, then you're going to end up adversely affecting the ability to get the economy going and trying to get unemployment, underemployment down. On the other hand, the real problem is not where we are today. By the way, how many of you heard that we have 15.5 trillion in debt? Please raise your hand. Well, that probably doesn't mean much to you, but let me tell you that that's just the tip of the iceberg, because that's just what the current debt is. The government has made promises under Social Security, Medicare, and other programs that make the total liabilities and unfunded promises that it's already made $65.5 trillion. How much is that? It's over $200,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. It's over $550,000 per household and per taxpayer in the United States. Median household income in the United States is $50,000. So that means if you really want to know the true story, the big picture, the government basically has a mortgage equal to 11 times the typical household income of every American household. And people don't have a house to back that mortgage. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to be honest with the American people of all ages to say that government has grown too big, promised too much, and it needs to restructure. But it has to be careful about how it does that. It's got to do it in a way that promotes economic growth, maintains a good social safety net for those truly in need, has reasonable level of taxes and enough to pay our bills and deliver on the promises we intend to keep, but doesn't continue to mortgage the future of our children and grandchildren and the unborn, because that's where we are right now. While the federal government has a problem, state and local governments have a problem too, because many of them have financial problems. And states, for example, rely upon the federal government for about 1/3 to 42% of their revenues. So when the federal government has to cut back on its spending, states are going to have a bigger problem. And when the states cut back on their spending, a lot of localities like Grand Rapids rely upon help from the state. That's going to affect them too. So the truth is, all levels of government, federal, state, and local, are going to have to take a hard look at what are they doing, what's working, what's not working, to try to get government to be more future focused and results oriented, and to make sure that what it's doing is affordable and sustainable. That's going to be a major effort. And for that to happen, two groups have to be much more involved than they have been in the past. First, business leaders, because they have a lot of influence, and other community leaders. They have a lot of influence on elected officials. And secondly, young people. This is your future. Your future is going to be largely impacted by what type of decisions are made and when they're made. How many of you have read about problems in Greece? Raise your hand. All right. Well, the Come Back America initiative put together the first sovereign fiscal responsibility index. It's a ranking of countries based upon how responsible they are with their finances. There's only 34 countries that we ranked. The number one is Australia. Greece is number 34, and you can understand that because of what you've been reading online or otherwise, okay, and what you've been seeing on television. But the United States is number 28 out of 34, down dramatically in the last 10 years. And both political parties are responsible for it. and both political parties are going to have to come together and help solve the problem. But for that to happen, the people are going to have to be much more informed and involved. All of you took the fiscal IQ quiz, correct? Did you, the one that's online, that's the Come Back America Initiative put together?
They did.
Well, just to let you know, the lowest average scores of all the people that have taken it are for people that are under 18. Now that's kind of understandable because they may not have been exposed to this kind of information, and you got to be 18 in order to be able to vote. But here's what's shocking. The second lowest average score is elected officials. I kid people saying that some people think that elected officials act like juveniles. That's a matter of opinion, but it's a matter of fact that they score like juveniles. And that's a real problem because they're the ones that have to solve the problem. And here's the second shocking fact. The lowest score after elected officials is the media, television, radio, other types of forms of the media. And these are the people who we're supposed to be relying upon to tell the people the facts, the truth, help them understand the tough choices that have to be made, to separate fact from fiction. What's going on right now, in all sincerity, and this is a nonpartisan statement and a non-personal statement, it's been going on for a long time. People are spending more money and giving more special tax benefits in order to get votes. And they're expecting you to pay the bill. And the only way that's going to stop is if the first three words in the Constitution come alive. We the people. They are the most important. They are the most powerful. And if the president, whoever that is, whether that be President Barack Obama in his second term, whether it be President Mitt Romney or whomever the Republicans come up with, or whether it be a third choice, and there will be a third choice under the Americans Elect movement. You ought to check it out at americanselect.org. online. There will be a third choice. Whoever wins, they have to go directly to the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, a way forward. They have to be able to work on a nonpartisan basis to be able to make tough choices sooner rather than later. Because whether it's our finances, whether it's our energy policy, our environmental policy, our healthcare policy, our tax policy, our infrastructure policy, or our immigration policy. All of those and many others are on an imprudent and unsustainable path. And we need to start making tough choices. And the only way to do that is to understand the truth and understand what some of the options are and the fact that doing nothing is simply not an option. So next week, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to state the facts, I'm going to speak the truth, I'm going to talk about the tough choices, and then I'm going to offer a way forward. What are some of the things that we have to do with regard to health care? What are some of the things we have to do with regard to Social Security and Medicare? What are some of the things that we have to do with regard to defense and other spending? What are some of the things that we have to do with regard to our tax policies in order to make sure that we can revitalize the economy, generate more job growth, and prevent bankrupting America? Let me give you, in closing, a little bit of hope. Look, the simple fact of the matter is we have serious problems, and our political system is broken. We're not making progress. We need to make a lot of progress pretty quickly, and that means this election is going to be really important. But the fact is that there is hope, because if you look at that ranking of countries that I mentioned before, number one's Australia, number two is New Zealand, number three is Sweden, and Canada's pretty high up there. All of those countries had big problems like the ones I'm talking about with regard to their finances in the 1990s. But they rose to the challenge, they made tough choices, and now they're rated high. If they can do it, we can do it. In addition, in the past, when America has faced great challenges, it's risen to the challenge and overcome that challenge. But as I said before, the only way that's going to happen is if the first three words of the Constitution come alive, we the people, especially young people, using social networking and other mechanisms. And if the president, whoever that is, makes this a top priority, uses the power of the presidency, goes directly to the American people, both on television and in person, et cetera, and provides the necessary leadership so that we can avoid what is happening in Greece happening here. Because the truth is, it could happen here, but it doesn't need to, and we need to make sure that it doesn't.
All right, Mr. Walker, thank you. Some words of encouragement for your arrival next week. These students have all been invited to attend, so that's one of your population group with the fiscal IQ quiz that you were worried about. The media is also invited to attend, and we'll have many business owners and community leaders who are those agents for change who will help spread your message. So we're grateful for that. I know these students have provided a few questions, if you can take a few moments to answer some of those. And what we can do is if they could stand up, say their name, and if you have trouble hearing, I'll be sure to repeat it into the microphone.
That's great, thank you.
All right, who wants to be the first one? Don't be shy. All right. Stephen in the back. You can say it from there. Just you can stay there. And
During the Bush administration, it was famously said that deficit doesn't matter. While obviously it's impossible to get rid of all deficit forever, how much deficit is truly a problem and how much is acceptable?
were you able to hear that at all?
I got it. Great question. First, that was Vice President Cheney who said deficits don't matter. And in my opinion, he was talking about politically, not economically, because deficits clearly do matter economically. Whether you're an individual, whether you're a company, or whether you're a country, you cannot spend more money than you make, charge it to the credit card, and expect not to have a day of reckoning at some point. Now, the fact of the matter is, the second part of your question was what? I'm sorry, could you repeat the second part? I see, good question. Here's the key. Let's talk about a couple of terms. Deficit and debt. The deficit, as you know, is the difference between how much revenue you take in a year and how much you spend. So it's the annual gap between how much you take in and how much you spend. The debt, on the other hand, is the sum total of all past deficits minus any surpluses, and we haven't had surpluses in a while. The key is the following: not the deficit, but the debt as a percentage of the economy. It's okay to run deficits in a time of recession. It's okay to run deficits if you're at a time of war or major military conflict. It is not okay to run deficits when the economy is strong and the nation is at peace. And the problem is that over the last 30 years, people have been accustomed to running deficits even when the economy was growing and even when we were at peace. And that is unacceptable. But what really matters is how much debt do you have as a percentage of your economy. Most economists will say that having debt of no more than 60% of your economy is acceptable. But if you take the United States as an example, if you count the debt that we owe to China and the public, and then if you count the debt that we owe to Social Security and Medicare, which is very real and is going to be paid, it's several $1 trillion. The U.S. is already over 100% of debt as a percentage of the economy, and it's adding debt at record rates. That is clearly too high. We are clearly on an imprudent and unsustainable path. And so what we need to do is that we need to have a comprehensive plan that will bring debt as a percentage of the economy down to a reasonable and sustainable level over a period of years without undercutting the economic growth. That doesn't require you to have surpluses, but it requires you to grow the economy faster than any deficit you may have. And so that's why it's a combination of growing the economy, bringing down the deficit so that the debt as a percentage of the economy can go down and be sustainable over time. By the way, you can go on our website, which is tcai.org, look for a Restoring Fiscal Sanity report, and it will provide you a couple of examples of how you can do just exactly what I said, looking at Social Security and healthcare and defense and taxes, and you'll see how it's possible to get it done if we get some leadership and if we get more pressure from the public for politicians to start making tough choices rather than continuing to kick the can down the road.
All right, another question? We got Marshall King here.
So I'm wondering, in your opinion, what's the most important action, like the most significant action we should take towards restoring fiscal sanity?
Well, we have to take a lot of actions, but one of the first things that I think we have to do is that we have to reimpose tough budget controls that will keep government from making more promises when it's already made more promises that it can keep, that will end up constraining spending, that will keep Congress from being able to provide tax cuts that are debt financed. Between the early 1990s and 2002, we had these types of controls in place. They were supported by President Herbert Walker Bush, the older Bush, Bush 41. They were supported by President William Jefferson Clinton. Bush was a Republican, Clinton was a Democrat. They both supported these things, and they made a difference. We went from large and growing deficits to large and growing surpluses, in part because of the existence of these rules. But after 2002, these controls expired, and things have been out of control ever since. And let me give you a couple of examples. The first round of so-called Bush tax cuts took place in 2000. We had a big surplus then. We could theoretically afford that, but it took place in 2001. The second round took place in 2003. We had already returned to deficits. We had gone to quote unquote war without declaring war. And yet taxes were cut again, and they were paid for with borrowing more money from China and other people. That's imprudent. That could not have happened if the budget controls were still in place. Another example on the spending side is the Affordable Care Act. How many of you have been watching the fact that the Supreme Court has got to make a decision on the Affordable Care Act? Well, that's very, very significant, okay? But the fact of the matter is that no matter what the Supreme Court decides, there's no way we can afford that. I mean, government already had made promises under Medicare alone that was tens of trillions of dollars more than it could afford. And now it's making more promises. And so as a result, that could not have happened if these budget controls were still in place. You can't cut taxes that aren't paid unless you cut spending. You can't make more promises unless you fund those promises. And so the first thing is that we've got to bring back tough budget controls, but we need to phase them in a way that doesn't undercut the recovery and that doesn't undercut our efforts to try to get unemployment and underemployment down. That's important because we have to grow the economy faster than we are now. By the way, more and more the federal budget is going for consumption for seniors, and less of the federal budget is going for investment and for young people. And that is not a prescription for prosperity in the future.
All right, just a follow-up on that question real quickly. Many states like Michigan have to have a balanced budget each year. The congressman who is joining the chamber and hosting you next week, Congressman Justin Amash, has been talking quite a bit about a balanced budget amendment. Would that be one of the budget controls that you're suggesting that Congress adopts?
Well, we clearly need a number of statutory controls which don't require a constitutional amendment. And we also need some constitutional changes, like, for example, a balanced budget amendment requires an amendment to the Constitution. Look, I'm okay with a balanced budget amendment as long as it is properly constructed and as long as it provides for an out when you have a declared war or a serious recession or depression. I'm okay with that. But I think the more important things are that we need to put a credit card limit on. There's got to be a limit as to how much of your future politicians can mortgage. Right now, there's no credit card limit. In addition, I think that we need to have controls like we had from the early 90s to 2002 that aren't constitutional but are statutory to keep us from hopefully ever getting to those constitutional limits. You need to have some flexibility, and you can't rely until you hit those constitutional limits before you start doing something, because you could be in, a bad economic state, or you could be at war at that time.
All right, maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll let you get back to the tough work you had. I realize you just got back from overseas, if that's correct, and a lot of work ahead of you.
In your opinion, what measures do you believe will help to reduce the debt and also spur economic growth?
Could you repeat the question, because I couldn't get it?
Okay. In your opinion, what do you believe will help reduce the debt yet spur economic growth?
What do you believe will help spur economic growth as well as reduce the debt? What measures?
All right. Well, first, I commend to you to go and take a look at that Restoring Fiscal Sanity report, which lays out a lot of information. But in sum, I think we have to do this. We have to take steps to get the economy going short term. That means that we might need to make some additional investments in things like critical infrastructure, which is deteriorating. We need to make some additional investments potentially in things like retraining programs, if you will, because we've got a big skills gap in this country. At the same point in time, we have to put together a plan that will address the drivers of the long-term deficits. And those are healthcare costs, our aging society, and our outdated tax system. And so we need to have a combined approach that will end up helping the economy now, and quite frankly, might actually make deficits a little bit worse in the short term, but it's coupled with actions that will deal with the true threat, the huge deficits that lie ahead that are driven by, aging society, longer lifespans, more and more retirees, fewer and fewer workers, out of control healthcare costs, and a tax system that, quite frankly, is way outdated.
All right, one final question.
As you know, the government spends an awful lot of money on defense. And of course, you don't want to cut defense spending to the point where it endangers our national security, but do you see cutting defense spending as a viable option to reduce our deficit?
Cutting defense spending is not only a viable option, it is. The fact of the matter is the United States spends as much as the next 15 nations combined on defense. And most of those nations are allies. Defense is a constitutional responsibility of the federal government. We need to take it very, very seriously. At the same point in time, the Defense Department is a huge bloated bureaucracy. We are spending money on things that it's questionable as to whether we need based upon current and future threats. In addition to that, we've made a lot of promises, especially in the area of healthcare or whatever, that we're going to have to restructure, not just in defense, but beyond defense, and at the federal, state, and local level. So yes, we can, we must, and ultimately we will cut defense spending, but how we do it matters so that we don't undercut national security. And we have to understand that national security is a lot more than the military. It's foreign policy and foreign relations, it's economic development. And that ultimately, if you don't keep your economy strong for today and tomorrow, everything will suffer over time. Our economy at home, our position in the world, our standard of living, and our national security.
All right, one final question from the mentor of these students, Mr. Chad Miller, who is here at City High School in Grand Rapids, and I'm going to let him ask that question.
Mr. Walker, you just kind of covered the question I was going to ask, but I was hoping that you could kind of paint like a broad picture for these juniors and seniors here at our high school on if this isn't taken care of, on what it's going to mean for them 10, 20, 30 years down the road.
In my opinion, our country is at a critical crossroads, and that the decisions that are made or that fail to be made by elected officials, especially in Washington, in the next 3 to 5 years will largely determine whether our collective future is better than our past. We're a great country, but we're not as great as we think we are. We have serious challenges that our political system is not taking seriously. The kind of debt crisis that is occurring in Greece, with dramatic spending cuts, with dramatic tax increases, with significant increases in unemployment, and a lot of domestic, a lack of domestic tranquility in the streets, could happen in the United States. It's not something that's likely to happen in the next year or two, but it could happen within the next 3 to 5 if we don't start putting our finances in order. But I'm not a pessimist. I'm an optimist. As I said, there is a way forward. If we can get some leadership, if we can get young people, the business community, and others more actively involved, if we can get a president that will make this a top priority, Australia, if New Zealand, if Sweden and others can do it, we can do it. We've got a little time, but we don't have unlimited time, and the clock is ticking. Here's the good news. America is still the land of opportunity. America is still the #1 country that people want to go to if they're given a choice. And in America, people that have a good education, strong work ethic, a positive attitude, and solid moral and ethical values still have unlimited potential. And so you still have an ability to largely control your own destiny. But I come back to where I started. We've got serious problems. We need to start acknowledging those problems. We need to start solving those problems. Because if we don't, then our economy will suffer. And if our economy suffers, that means there's less opportunity, higher unemployment, higher underemployment. Our position in the world will decline. Our standard of living at home could decline, and the domestic tranquility in our streets could be adversely affected. It doesn't have to be that way, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that we make the tough choices to make sure that our future is better than our past, that you have more opportunity than I had, and that America stays great.
All right, Mr. Walker, thank you very much for joining us today. We definitely appreciate it. And we want to let you get back to the great work that you're doing, and wish you a great week, and we'll see you next week in Grand Rapids.
And hope it doesn't snow.
No. All right, take care.
Well, there you have it. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I want to just kind of reinforce a couple of things that he said. We, the people. I don't know how many of you will be voting age by November. We have some important elections coming up. I have voted in every single election since the day I turned 18 because I think it's my responsibility. We get the government we deserve. We elect these people to represent us, and so we need to be engaged in the process. It is possible, as he said, to be optimistic about our future. Governor Snyder, in 1 year in office, changed the way Michigan did business, and he balanced our budget. They approved a balanced budget last year. Now, did it hurt? Absolutely it did. A lot of people were like, I don't want it to affect me. Why can't it affect others? And one of the things that impressed me the most about the way Governor Snyder approached it was that he said, this is going to affect everyone. Everyone has to have skin in the game. No one's going to like it, but we can't just ask the neighbors to have skin in the game and ask for a pass for ourselves. And I think that was a really great way to provide leadership to a state that needed it badly, and to reverse kind of a decade of a trend of what similar to what we were just hearing about today. And in a year, he turned it around and passed a balanced budget. We all have skin in the game. Budgets were cut, taxes were raised, things were impacting all of us. But it is possible, but we have to be engaged in the process. Those of you that are 18, become informed about the issues, become informed about the folks running for office that will be representing us in the next 2 to 4 to 6 years, and participate in the process. Donna Joe, do you want to say anything? And then we will answer questions if you have them.
Well, let's talk about standard of living. Mr. Walker talked about how your standard of living will change. Let's put it in perspective. How many of you, so you're mostly seniors, right? You're going to go to college in the fall? Okay. Some of us pay for college by borrowing. Ooh, that's funky. So some of us use debt, right? We'll borrow from the federal government. We might maybe borrow from our family or from a bank. Let's talk about what it means to borrow, right? Let's put it down to our perspective, and then we can understand maybe that $15.5 trillion. What does it mean to borrow money? What are we doing? What are you doing? Taking the money with hopes to pay it back later. Yeah, it's a promise to pay it back. So we're borrowing from our future, right? So we can live today and do something today, go to college, right? So there's kind of the good debt and there's bad debt. So borrowing for college, you're going to borrow probably 80 grand to both. Yeah, that's a lot, right? For your education, $80,000, $20,000 a year. But what's going to happen when you graduate? You're gonna get a job, hopefully a better paying job than had you, right, if you didn't go to school. But what's going to happen with that new money that you're going to get from your new job? You got to pay back the loan. So now your standard of living is dropped, right? But it's better because you went to school. Does that make sense? So your standard of living is going to be reduced somewhat, but it's improved because you went to college. You're going to get that better job, right? So that borrowing kind of makes sense. Now, how many of you have cell phones? Oh my word. All right, so is it, everybody does, yeah, that's a dumb question. Wait, I just got a cell phone last year, so that's pretty pathetic, right? So if we use our credit card while you're in college and you finance your cell phone, I don't know what you guys pay, $50 a month, $30 a month for your cell phone, and you put that on your credit card, but then you pay your minimum balance at $5 to $10 a month. And you keep charging that $50 every month to that credit card, right? You're financing, again, what? Today's lifestyle with tomorrow's dollar. That's going to reduce your standard of living. Those types of usage of debt, that's bad debt. So most of what we're doing, so that handout that we've provided with you, you can see most of what we do, the federal government, I'm not the federal government, I'm the city government. Most of what the federal government does is we transfer money to people, right? About $2.2 trillion is what we do. That money is most of it, some of it, right, because of Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. We can't afford all of what we're doing. We've got a I think it's $3 trillion deficit. So most of that we're financing with debt, your standard of living. So what's going to happen when you keep saying your standard of living is going to go down? You're going to have to spend more of your discretionary money for taxes, right? Your tax rates are going to go up in the future to pay for the debt that we incur today so we can have this lifestyle that we all like. And you can see what a $10,000 looks like. That's not very impressive, is it? Like you thought maybe 10 grand was a lot. $1 million looks even worse. Right, you tower over that. That's stacks of $10,000. You would think being a millionaire, maybe that's why that singer wants to be a billionaire, right? Because a billion, that third cell, that's pretty impressive, right? That's 5 deep of those pallets. And $1 trillion is 50 deep, too high. That's like a Costco warehouse full of cash. And so we would need 15 and a half Costco warehouse type buildings to house all of the debt that we have. This is kind of depressing, isn't it? Yeah. Then you've got state government and local government debt and all those unfunded liabilities that Mr. Walker talked about. There's a lot. So we've got to do a lot. We've got to start now. And you guys are the future because you are the ones that are going to have to bear this. You and me, right? I'm old, but not that old. So I'm going to have to pay too, right? So I would encourage you to go home and talk to your parents. How many of you guys talk about this at home? Some of you. So go home and ask your parents. Tell them to take the physical IQ test. See if you do better than they did, right? And then teach them kind of about this because this is important. If you wanna live in a society where we can do things, we've got to get this under control today. Questions?
Any questions? Or even thoughts? What did you think about Mr. Walker, what he said, compared to what you thought coming in?
I was just wondering. Sure. I was just wondering if we do take the necessary steps to, balance our budget and get everything in order, have it healthy, how will that decrease our standard of living compared to what we're used to right now? Or how will it change it?
In the short term, it'll change our standard of living. Like Mr. Baker was saying, Governor Snyder did some difficult choices, right? Raised our taxes now, so a little bit more is going to come out of our discretionary spending today. But what's the trade-off? It means less in the future. So do we want to pay a few percent more today, or do we want to pay 10 to 20% more 10 years from now? So the standard of living will be reduced, but in the long run, it will be improved.
And the impact on the standard of living later is what we really need to be thinking about also, because the longer we keep kicking the can down the road, the bigger the can gets. And the bigger impact it has on our standard of living, your standard of living, my standard of living in the future.
It seems like a lot of elected officials, both locally and nationally, are trying to dodge the issue because it's kind of difficult politically to hit it. But in what way can we, as the students in this room, have some kind of actual effect on it in the short run? Because the quicker we are able to take out this, as you said, the faster we can reduce the problem.
Well, a couple of things. I do want to pass out invitations to all of you to come and see David Walker next week in person at the Chamber's event and be our guest at this event. We'd love to see you there, as well as your teacher and your principal. If you'd like to, if you're in town, I know it's spring break next week, so you won't be in school. But if you're in town, I really hope you'll take us up on our invitation. Because your voice, you may not realize it, you have really have a strong voice in this discussion. The elected officials really listen to young people like yourselves because they hear from us all the time. And they say, well, he's representing the business community's perspective. And we are, because that's what I do. And so it's one viewpoint. But you have a much stronger voice than you actually realize, and I encourage you to come and exercise that next week and to continue to be involved and to use your voice every time you have the opportunity, and use your power to vote when you have the opportunity in the fall. But you can influence the process. I've seen young people become engaged in the past and really have a strong influence on the process because the elected officials don't hear from you very often. So they will really listen. And so use your voice.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm an elected official. So the city comptroller, it's spelled, you said earlier, comptroller, what a funny word, right? So it's spelled comptroller. Technically it's pronounced controller. There's kind of a debate down at City Hall about the pronunciation. But for the city of Grand Rapids, it's an elected position, right? So what do? I think I'm not really a politician. I'm a different kind of person. I'm kind of like David Walker, in my opinion. Are we okay? That's not a fire alarm or anything? All right. The debt just came. Somebody called for it, right? We've got to pay them. Oh, no. to kind of put politics aside and really focus on the issues. And I think the problem is we don't have politicians who will do that, right? They always want to tell us what we want to hear, not what we need to hear. And I think David Walker sends a very good message. So we need the kinds of politicians that will send that same message and listen to you guys. And what can you do? You know, you can call, you can write, you can Facebook, you can tell your friends, you can tell your parents, because this is a pretty big and bad message, right? I mean, all these numbers are big, they're bad, they're ugly, they're depressing. I don't know how you feel, but you all have this look on your face like you're sad or maybe you just want to leave. But nevertheless, right, it's an important issue, and we have to stop focusing on one single issue and talk about all of the spending, all of the debt collectively.
Misinformation is something that's really rampant currently. What can you do to combat that so there can be financial changes so that people actually know what's going on?
Yeah, there's a huge blogging world, right? Tons of misinformation out there. What I would do is encourage you guys to go find that right information and correct it, right? So when somebody says something to you, and like when Mr. Walker kind of made it more clear about the difference between deficit and debt. That's a pretty big difference, right? And it's often used interchangeably, and we shouldn't do that. So make sure, don't feel bad about correcting somebody. Be like, no, this is what deficit means, this is what debt means, or this is really what these numbers are if we add these unfunded liabilities. Don't be afraid to discuss this kind of in an open, non-adversarial way and let them know about these, about the true numbers. Other questions? Yeah.
In the 1950s and such, as soldiers were coming back from World War II, there was a really big baby boom and such at that time. And then as they got older, there was a wave of college admissions and home construction and such. And that generation is now going into the social security thing. And he mentioned that seniors, the seniors is where most of our money is going currently rather than to the young people. Do you think that's an actual factor, just the fact that that generation is so many more people, or is that just kind of another on the side thing?
Well, they're because of the plans that are in place, right? Because of Social Security and Medicare, once you hit 65 and you retire, you qualify for all of that. And they are a lot of people. And talk about a very strong and powerful group of folks, right? So why do we not cut Social Security? Because they vote more than you do, probably, right? They're a pretty large generation. And also they've paid into the system. Right, so they've paid their dues, and so they want their money and probably rightfully deserve it. But we've got to do something to change, because one of the questions on your fiscal IQ test was you get more back, right, from Social Security than you actually pay into it. So he said the median income was about $50,000 in the country. So the Social Security tax is 6.2%. Well, it's 4.2% right now because they made that little cut, but technically it's 6.2%. So you're spending about, what, $3,900 to the federal government every year, so you make that over the next 30 years. So it's a little less than $100,000 that you send. If you live, the average age now is over 80. If you live 15 years beyond your retirement, you're going to get back about $360,000, right? So of course, it's an investment. It's supposed to grow. But if that keeps happening, there's no money. And we're running out of money. And it used to be for like every 100 workers, there was one Social Security recipient. It's almost to a 1-to-1 ratio because it hasn't been fully funded. And that's the unfunded liability that he was talking about.
I know we talked about a credit or a limit for everything, but in reality, knowing that we've gone this far and not had a limit at all, do you think in reality that all of this is going to happen? Because I know America, a lot of people see America as kind of like stubborn and greedy, and not a lot of people in America like that big of a change. So in reality, is this, a lot of people have high hopes for this, but this might take like years and years and years. And, some of us, we're still young, and by the time we're 50, who knows how this is going to go?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. So if we keep doing this, who cares if we're borrowing from the future? We just keep borrowing from the future, right? So when you're my age, you'll borrow from your kid's future. Yeah, that's okay because we did it when I was a kid. But we're running up to a precipice, really, where our debt is unsustainable. Our debt is basically people lending us money, right? We use that money for today. So if they call their debt, like if China comes up and says, we want you to pay back our money. Well, we've got to figure out a way to find them trillions of dollars, right? And how are we going to do that? Because we don't have that. We're going to have to either go print money, which is not a good idea, or go find somebody else to lend it to us. So we're at a point where it is unsustainable. And look at Greece, look at Ireland, look at Argentina a few years ago, or the other countries that David Walker mentioned. They were hitting this precipice and they made decisions, and now they're much better off. So do we have to fall off that cliff before people will actually make those decisions? Perhaps. Do we have to become Greece before people take it seriously? I'd hope not, but we're almost there.
Sometimes that's what it takes, is a really big smack in the face before we'll address the issues. And unfortunately, I think we're coming down that path faster than we hoped to. I think we're going to wrap it up today, and we appreciate all of your time. I hope you do join us next week. Let Chris know today if you know you're going to be able to attend, or give us a call and let us know you're coming. Really would like to see you there. And again, thanks for your attention today and your participation. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much for coming to our school today and spending your time. And Chris, thanks for setting this up. I think it's been an outstanding experience. And I think we're all very appreciative of what you guys have done here today. So thank you very much.